Alongside the BFR Titan and the P90, Season 8 of the finals finally makes a variety of different playstyles viable again. And it's all thanks to a few very significant balance changes that EMBARK has blessed us with this season. On September 13th, I had the privilege of casting the $3,200 Ape Squad Worlds tournament. Not only was this the largest independent prize pool in the finals history, but it was also the first real glimpse of the new meta in action. Top teams had to adapt on the fly, showing everyone how the best players in the game were responding to the changes that Season 8 brought. And for these teams, it was more than just a nice cash prize. It doubled as the perfect prep ahead of EMBARK's $100,000 DreamHack Major. And with closed qualifiers starting on September 20th, the stakes couldn't be higher. In this video, I'm going to be breaking down which key balance changes of Season 8 have reshaped the meta and what strategies top players and teams are already using to stay ahead, including the most viable team comps that we saw in this tournament and how ENVY adapted the new changes to take the win. My name is Artie and I'm a full-time coach and caster in the finals. And if you enjoy this kind of deep dive into the finals comp scene, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's next. Let's start off with the balance changes themselves because they set the foundation for everything that follows. Season 8 shipped with a long list of balance tweaks, but it wasn't a single nerf or buff that reshaped the meta. It was how they all added up that really mattered. For specializations, the dematerializer finally got hit with a long-awaited nerf, removing a charge which helped slow down the pace of fights. On its own, that probably wouldn't have been enough to push teams off it, but the healing beam received a pretty significant buff itself, going from 40 healing per second up to 46. That extra healing factor means that it can now dish out more than 250 HP before overheating, which is why we started seeing way more teams running it in their core comps. The H+ Infuser was also hit with a small nerf, dropping from 15 to 14 healing per shot, yet most teams kept it in their loadout, with most players still deeming it more useful than other gadget options. The combination of the healing beam and H+ Infuser changes have created a meta where sustained comps finally have teeth. Add to that the fact that every class now has a viable poke damage option, you can start to see why so many top players are rethinking their entire approach to team comps. On the weapons side, the Pike 556 changes were the most important. Its base damage dropped from 50 to 48, which pushed the light body shot breakpoint from 3 hits to 4. But here's where the bigger picture comes in. The LH1 got a small bump from 42 to 44 damage, which again on its own wouldn't have been enough, but combined with the Pike nerf, Light suddenly felt much more comfortable contesting range again. The CB01 repeater also jumped up from 84 to 88 damage, cutting its breakpoint for heavy body shots down from 5 to 4. That shift immediately made it a real option in tournament play, and together, these overlapping changes have reshaped the medium and light ranged meta. Now, while we did see teams running the repeater, the LH1, and even the Pike still post-nerf, the majority of teams were sticking with the FAMAS and 9.3R, and there's two key reasons for this. First being that these two guns are still completely untouched and remain firmly in S tier, and second, the Heavy's new option for poke damage is extremely strong in the right hands. The BFR Titan is an absolute beast if you can hit your shots, and at the highest level of competition, everyone is hitting their shots. 2 to kill a light, 3 for a medium, and 4 for a heavy. Seeing this in the hands of top players is genuinely terrifying, but it's also punishing if you miss because of the long reload. In combination with the Deagle's slight nerf, the BFR has become the main ranged pick for heavies, and now we can start to talk about how all this comes together for the pro teams finding their footing in the Season 8 meta. Hello, editing Artie here. On Monday, September 15th, while I was making this video, Oscar messaged the teams in the closed qualifiers the following: banned weapons during closed qualifiers. For the closed qualifiers, the P90 and the BFR Titan will both be banned and not allowed in any contestant loadouts. The weapons have been in the game too short of a time period for us to be able to correctly analyze their health. This, combined with them not being part of the equipment for open qualifiers, led to this decision. Again, the P90 and BFR Titan are not allowed throughout the closed qualifiers. And honestly, I think this is a good thing, but keep that in mind throughout the rest of this video as I mentioned the BFR Titan. It is still absolutely going to have its place in the meta in Season 8, but that won't be the case in the closed qualifiers. Anyway, back to the video. When we look at the Ape Squad Worlds finals, the baseline comp was crystal clear. Light running dash with the 9.3R paired with Glitch Grenade, Gateway, and H+ Infuser. Mostly unchanged from last season, but more on that later. Medium with Heal Beam and the FAMAS, supported by the same gadgets as before: Defib, Goo Grenade, and Jump Pad. As we spoke about earlier, the Heal Beam instead of the DMAT is the biggest change, but since Medium is now firmly on the FAMAS instead of the Pike, the Medium is much less of a wild card in most fights. with fewer options for moving through the environment thanks to the lack of DMAT. The Heavy now has a few different options for both weapons and gadgets. Winch Claw remains on top, even though we did see some Mesh Shield and even Charge and Slam a couple times. But for weapons, the BFR Titan is clearly the dominant pick, with the SA-1216 still being opted for by a few teams on certain maps. Dome, RPG, and C4 are still staples on the gadget front, but on maps with long sightlines like Bernal and Monaco, we actually saw the healing emitter more often than not in place of the C4 in order to support the ranged poke fights with the BFR. This is the foundation of the Season 8 sustain meta. Heal Beam plus Infuser, poke from the BFR giving heavies reliable range pressure, and follow through from the 9.3R and FAMAS. But the real story was how each team tweaked around that baseline. Let's talk about our top two teams, Nightmare and Envy. Nightmare were the most experimental. Nightmare Uni swapped the 9.3R for the M11 on light, giving much faster close range pressure to really challenge the opposing heavies BFR up close. On medium, Lasagna stayed consistent with Heal Beam plus FAMAS, but the real curveball came from Gremlin on heavy. Instead of the BFR Titan, Gremlin opted to stick with the SA-1216 on most maps. Combined with Uni's M11, Nightmare's approach was to challenge the poke comps up close with pure brawl and sustain. And while it almost worked out in their favor, on the last cash out of the grand finals on map 5, Envy remained in control. So let's talk about Envy in first place. Envy didn't have any crazy changes compared to the rest other than one thing. Busy committed to the BFR through and through. While Stooge ran the standard 9.3R light and STN2k stayed on the Heal Beam FAMAS, the only changes towards the end of their upper bracket run were in their map-specific adaptations. Busy swapped C4 for healing emitter on Bernal and Monaco. Envy's consistency on the BFR the entire tournament allowed them to really refine how STN2k and Stooge played around it. And it's worth noting that even though these were the loadouts for the top teams, the LH1, Pike, and CBO1 still did make appearances. For lights, the LH1 was the second most picked, actually showing up more often than the ARN. And for mediums, the Repeater was the second most picked, but the FAMAS was by far the most common option. The changes to the team comps didn't just shift what weapons and gadgets were viable, they completely changed the flow of fights. In Season 7, team fights were explosive. DMATs cracked walls open while Pikes deleted lights instantly, and the H+ Infuser was a crutch that kept lights perma-leashed to the heavies. But in Season 8, that sustain, now spread across the light and medium, has slowed things down without really killing the action. Instead of quick trades, fights now felt like a tug of war where cooldowns matter more. BFR picks at range can be collapsed in on by a light who's freer to push away from the heavy, and rotations plus environmental positioning mattered a lot more with no dematerializer. Add in double, sometimes even triple healing utility, and we're seeing a very different tempo of play. And combine all that with the BFR Titan now being the prime source of poke damage instead of the medium, it means that we're seeing far less heavy dome winch SA-1216 spam than before. Even teams that still run that combo need to get a lot more creative with its application, since matching that other heavy up close now feels a lot different. The best example of this came in the grand finals between Envy and Nightmare. Nightmare's aggressive brawl comp with Uni's M11 and Gremlin's SA-1216 tried to collapse in on the other team quickly and overwhelm them. Envy, on the other hand, leaned into the BFR poke damage and let Stooge off the leash to chase finishers. Sustain from both teams dragged fights out, forcing one side to inevitably overcommit or hard reset, and there were countless times where Uni would survive a fight and be able to peel off just long enough for Gremlin and Lasagna to coin back in. Something that almost never happened in Season 7's faster-paced meta. In the final moments of Map 5, Nightmare's aggression nearly broke through, but Envy's discipline and consistent damage output let them stabilize, hold the cash out, and close the series. It was the perfect showcase of just how different Season 8 fights feel compared to just one season ago. But don't just take my word for it. Here's what Envy's own STN2k had to say about it after their big win. The very first tournament here in Season 8, was this tournament more or less difficult than anything you've played coming through this new meta?
I would say the game is less unpredictable, because if somebody is somewhere, then without DMAT now, every room is an actual room, and they can't just walk through from what should be a 3-second rotate into a 0.3 second rotate just with 2 walls gone. I definitely think that when you locate somebody, it's a lot easier to kind of find them and isolate them, as people can't get away as easily. Obviously, there's light with their dashes still going crazy, but at least the medium wise, if you can isolate that medium or heavy, then even with the heals, it's still a game with a lot of different moving parts.
So let's talk about the DMAT real quick. Why did you guys make the choice to just get rid of the DMAT and go for healing beams? Do you really feel like healing is in such a good state right now now that you guys are able to use it, or is DMAT just kind of getting too nerfed?
So definitely with the heal buff, it's a lot easier to kind of be a good healing med and keep your heal beam off cooldown. That and the heal gun getting nerfed, as well as DMAT and Goo getting their animation cancel taken away at the beginning of the ceiling, just made me want to pick up heal beam a lot quicker than it seemed like everybody else. I feel like every team we scrimmed started with DMAT, and then we were doing really well against them, and then halfway through they started changing to heal beam.
Gotcha. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. We saw so many adaptations coming in Thursday up until now, but one of the other things that obviously has been changing, especially for the medium class, is the weapon choice. The first day we did see a lot of P90s, but I saw you were very stable on the FAMAS. Is there anything that would sort of pull you away from the FAMAS? Do you think the FAMAS is the only viable option right now for medium, or what's the current setup as far as medium weapon choice is concerned?
I don't know if you guys watched, but I actually used the Pike on Skyway against NTMR the first time we played them when we 2-0'd them. That gun is still good. People are still kind of sleeping on it. It's my favorite gun, if not the Scar or Revo, but we don't talk about those two. The Pike is still very good. The FAMAS is kind of the high burst damage if you can get away with it, but you're still kind of standing still most of the time. So lights kind of eat you up, as you guys may have seen a few times. And the P90, I really enjoy it, actually. It's like my main gun in ranked. I actually scrimmed way more with the P90 than the FAMAS. I picked up the FAMAS last night. Every scrim before that, I was running as off meta as you can get. I was trying Scar. I was trying to make it work. I would drop like 0 kills a game, and I was just not helping my team at all. But in terms of weapon choice, it really is map dependent, and it really is how your playstyle kind of adapts with the gun and the heal beam and what you can do now. You can't just run away anymore as medium anymore.
There's a lot of sustain, and at the same time there is a lot of chunk damage that's going on. These team fights are lasting a lot longer. What do you think is the main thing that's drawing out these fights?
I think it is the sustain, that is the healing, and people not getting randomly dematted through a wall and insta dying anymore.
Got it. Yeah, more of the DMAT not being there than the heal beam being there, I would say. Season 8 has only just begun, but it's already reshaping the game in a huge way. The finals feels fresher and more competitive than ever before, with sustain comps, poke pressure, and the environment actually mattering now all playing a role. And while the P90 has proven to be a top ranked choice for a lot of pro players, it hasn't replaced the FAMAS in a tournament setting or in scrims quite just yet. But time will tell if more teams adopt it the same way that Uni has stayed faithful to the M11. My prediction is that we'll see more teams experiment with the P90 and LH1 over time as they figure out how they want to play around the overall balance of the sustain meta, leaning more into brawl or poke respectively. And with DreamHack's $100,000 Grand Major just around the corner, what we saw at Ape Squad Worlds might only just be the beginning of how this meta evolves. With the most important takeaway of this all being that the DMAT Pike playstyle is out and heal beam plus FAMAS is in. If this video was helpful, pressing that like button down there would mean the world to me. And if you want to keep up with how this scene develops, or maybe even how to bring these lessons into your own ranked games, make sure you're subscribed. Thank you so much for watching, and don't worry, you'll see me around.